we'll start off with, I'm just going to ask this like just random, because both of us have the, let's say, the great position to like work across a ton of categories. Now you have even ones that are outside of CPG and things and projects that work, but like, what are you falling in love with lately? Like category wise or like, is there things that just have, you keep going back to, like you're drawing you in? Like, I know that was like a weird first.
That's a great
Yeah.
one. What am I falling in love with these days? I mean, look, we're at Bev Forum. Beverage is like probably my first and always going to be one of my loves, And then, in the beverage sort of categories, I like, this is not too sexy, but I love the tea category. I love the coffee category. I love the trends right now that are sort of going towards clean label. And, you know more about energy than I think anybody does. And, when you're looking at like, hey, let's go cleaner label, let's take like, ingredients you don't understand out of the ingredient panel, what is ancient and efficacious and can sort of go from a varietal and a location standpoint and a traceability standpoint, I think as deep as people go in wine. Right?
Yeah.
You look at tea and you look at coffee. And so, I do think there's some trends right now in tea. You've got the half days of the world and you've got the swoons of the world and you've got the St. James of the world and you've got Just Iced Tea with Seth Goldman. Like there's kind of a tea kind of bubbling up revolution of disrupting that. And I think even more so, there can be some work in coffee. Right? Yeah. You've got Starbucks and you got Dunkin' that have sort of depressed the category a little bit because of their relationships with some of the conglomerates. But, I think, and by the way, let's just hit buzzwords, but tariffs.
Yeah.
I think tariffs could also sort of have some pressure on people getting introduced to varietals of coffee from non-obvious places.
Yeah.
If these tariffs go long term. And I do think that might give our palates an opportunity to sort of really get into like Ethiopian coffee versus Colombian coffee versus Salvadoran coffee, versus Egyptian coffee, etc. Right? So that category, I do think over the next 5-10 years is something I'd really like to see in an RTD space. I'm really interested to see how that lays out.
Yeah, I think both of those spaces, like you mentioned, like they have that connection, or I guess there can be some depth to the sourcing, the types, like wine. Like there is a story to be told in some of that. I think right now, unfortunately, a lot of that hasn't happened. And I got crushed by this statement, and I'm going to say it again. And when I post this, probably I'll get crushed again. But I made this comment around the last bit of the inflation, and I'm not stating that tariffs cause inflation, whatever, because that's in its own right. But I said that the last bit of inflation actually was, in a way, a silver lining to kind of break us from this mold of just the cheapest, easiest thing. Like it got people to shift their mind a little bit, and maybe that allowed them to explore things or be more selective on things and maybe learn about things. So when you're talking about if it's different, coffee varieties or teas, and like even that whole lineage of traceability, where like it provides the opportunity for a founder to be able to justify that, and that maybe gives them the right to win customers that maybe wouldn't normally be there because they're just defaulting to the cheapest thing possible. So like I think that, and this is maybe the strategist in me, I'm a counterpuncher, like everything bad is good. Like I think about changing, if it's tariffs, if it's pricing changes, if it's COVID, like that's consumer behavior changing. People are moving around. That means to me there's chance, there's opportunity, there's things you can kind of adjust to and move to. But a lot of times people can't get over the initial punch in the face, and I'm like, I'll eat the punch and like let's see what else we can do with this. So I do think like tariffs in another case, if we want to move this in a different direction, or even just the MAJA kind of that movement of like a lot of that, I think provides the opportunity for every single product, even the ones that you would consider etched in stone, to now have to go through a renovation phase. Like everything's up for debate again. Like, if it's Gatorades with the color, like everything, the panel is now opened up again. So if I was anybody in the space, if I'm a supplier, if I'm a whatever, all of a sudden the ones that you could never touch because they were locked into deals becomes an opportunity again. But people are looking at it like, oh my God, this is so much hectic. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of opportunity too.
Dude, I think both of those things, in terms of creating opportunity for sort of insurgent brands, it's potentially massive, right? I mean, the MAJA stuff of like, hey, let's revisit, calling some of the stuff that in the U.S. we use that we don't use outside the U.S. and that big companies have used for a long time to sort of reduce cost and make things more economical. Taking those out, that's a huge opportunity for insurgent brands who haven't been using those themselves for a long time. The tariffs create this opportunity for nimble supply chains.
Yeah.
If you can move your coffee source from a high tariff place to a lower tariff place, like a Starbucks can't just do that. The volumes they're operating on, they have to operate on a slower scale. But also, look, you talk about the acquisition sort of environment. Like, let's say this progresses, right? You take your dyes out of your Fruit Loops, right? It increases the price somewhat. But, like, people are only going to pay so much money for Fruit Loops.
Yeah.
And if the margin's lower, what will they pay more for? They'll pay more for a Magic Spoon. They'll pay more for Three Wishes, right? So that creates an incentive for, a Kellogg to say, hey, look, now my legacy cereals, I can't make them as cheaply. Let's go find a premium product that I have a better margin on.
Yeah, if we talk about that like four-way intersection, the taste, convenience, the nutrition, and functionality, like the margin is in some of those, kind of the nutrition and the functionality side. Like you can justify a higher price point, that the opportunity for these brands to carve out more value and then become more attractive, because then they can help out some of these. I guess concern a lot of times, and this is maybe a little bit less on the food side than it is when we're talking about some of the big players in the beverage space, is that they've built this structure that's set up for certain things. Like you have to be burning at such a heat before the gasoline doesn't put you out. It actually, so can they adjust and adapt to be able to take advantage of this? And do they see this as an opportunity, or are they going to decide maybe that's not the right move for them? Like, I think there's still a lot of posturing that are going on, but you do see, I think, with the string of acquisitions over these big ones. Obviously, there's a lot of the smaller ones as well that don't get as much press, but there is an appetite still for these emerging challenger, category brands or whatever. Like I would argue that it's just as great of an opportunity as ever. There's never been a better time to like build these things and go through the stress, it's worth it.
I'd say absolutely. I would say that, look, the guidance from the major conglomerates has been like somewhat dismal, right?
Yeah.
Pepsi, Coke have all sort of said, hey, the guidance is down.
Yeah.
But when that happens, look, there are companies that are used to losing pennies of market share a day. And if that's going to sort of advance, right, if that's going to speed up, they're going to look to replace that through acquisition. And, we haven't, the spirits industry, which is inevitably moving into the non-alc CPG industry, has only started to scratch the surface of that, sort of melding of those genres.
Yeah.
And, you look at like Fever Tree's, U.S. acquisition by Molson, which I worked on, as a really sort of interesting partnership between two parties, which, allows Molson to get significantly into non-alc in a sort of a very unique way, but partnering with Fever Tree, right, as opposed to a straight acquisition. It's, I think, and I'm watching it, obviously, I think it's going to be wildly successful, and if it is, I think that deal is going to be looked at as sort of a seminal moment in unlocking the beer house's sort of entrance into some of these non-alcs, because you've seen it, right? Like, Budweiser could have acquired Ghost, and they didn't, because the thing was, they were worried it was going to consume the company, right? Because the growth was so crazy, the price was so high, it kept them out of the game. But now you see they're looking at sort of alternative, ways to get into these industries and sort of make money. I'm super excited about the next 3 years, what that looks like. Because look, the more people in the mix,
Yeah.
the more activity there's.
Yeah. I love this whole total beverage idea of like, but, working within the current, we'll call them archaic rules that were established for prohibition, like
Yep.
you have to play these games to get around. One of the things that I highlighted a few years ago that I think maybe will start to be even more leveraged is like these proxy investment vehicles where then, say PepsiCo and Celsius then acts as an acquirer, but yet through, some other direction they can get involved where similar with any of these kinds, like you end up playing it and maybe you can leverage it in different ways, but like it's a chess or a multi, game speed chess thing over just the typical checkers acquisitions type of thing. Like I think there's going to be a way for them to play these games differently that then they can get around the rules, because who knows if they ever change. I mean,
Absolutely, man. I mean, like, I think that what the bigger parties are doing is they are getting smarter about how to work with the sort of, smaller, more insurgent companies that have like massive, amazing marketing funnels that, they wish the bigger companies wish they had, but, not close to any of the resources. Like if you look at Bloom Energy's launch, which, is very much driven by, Mari and Greg and Leo, and that's their brand, they're in control of it, but they're powered by Nutrabolt partnership, which is powered by KDP's partnership. And those beverages are in Target and major retailers, and all those associations allowed that to happen. But I think that product launch has to be the biggest, most successful launch of an independent beverage, at least in energy.
Nobody's even talking about it. How massive that, like, I don't know why. I pay attention to a lot of things, and I tend to probably see a lot more. But I still think from a just any detail, nobody's even really mentioning it that well. Like, and it's like I was talking to Greg, and I've known Greg well, and I think that people are just not respecting what they're doing. Like it's absurd.
Detriment
and it's kind of like the Bloom Pop. Like you think he's talking about how people are just trashing. Like what right do you have to launch this? And it's like you have no idea even like, do you know what we've done? Like, you could have said that with energy, and you probably did, and we proved you wrong, and maybe, we'll try it again or whatever. But I think like and this is probably one of my things that I mention a lot of times, is that the nutrition channel, the ones that started or incubated with powders or capsules or pills, like there's a little bit of disrespect from the old guard of the big CPG food and beverage, where they still look at them and they maybe don't respect their brashness of actually being able to make it happen. Like, and it's kind of sad, because I think with Ghost or Alani or even Nutrabolt, like they've proven that they can do it. It's not that they are just talking into the air and like hoping this is happening. It's happening. It's past that point. So when these guys come out, I would hope that they can see these guys for what they are and like respect it, because a lot of them are eating their lunch. Like they're just like,
I mean, look, I agree. It's an antiquated way of looking at these brands. I mean, it's thinking about it like when people were selling tubs of creatine, and whey protein, and there was no brand loyalty. That doesn't exist anymore. I mean, people can launch these direct-to-consumer powdered products. Vital Proteins was a great example of one.
Think about AG1. Like, just
AG1,
I mean, this literally has no idea how big that company is. No, like people have no idea.
Right. And now they have staying power, and now you're seeing those companies move into the lower margin, higher cost, but higher reward, categories. And I agree they're being overlooked and sort of underappreciated, undervalued. But this is why this is such an exciting environment, right? Because this industry is constantly being re-envisioned. It's constantly being improved. It's constantly being reimagined. Will in our lifetimes we see a beverage company overtake Coke or Pepsi for sort of supremacy? I don't know. It'd be interesting to see, but it's missing. It's all those blind spots that those big companies have, which might make that possible someday.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think there's a higher probability every day You know, like I always thought that's just no chance.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it's going to happen. I don't know. I was trying to think of like outside of, you know, you mentioned the Fever Tree deal. Is there any other ones recently that has just been super cool that you were like, man, what a chance we had to work on that one?
Yeah, you know, I mean, there's a few. We have a few in the hopper that are probably this year, next year that I can't talk about, unfortunately, because of client confidentiality. You know, one I really love is Promix, which we did end of the year, and obviously Albert and Devin are good friends of mine. But you know, and I kind of saw that from the beginning, but looking at what they did in sort of that, again, that clean label, that sort of the clean label supplement.
Yeah.
Area, right. And hey, we're doing, you know, beef liver pills, and we're doing sort of sustainably traceable sort of sourced way. And, you know, we're having like, you know, we're doing more of a, like a sort of food as medicine hybrid of supplements. And seeing how that resonated with consumers, right? Devin was my trainer at one point, and I remember when we were sort of working out, we'd be chatting, and he'd be like recommending stuff to me, and he'd be like, I need to build like, you know, a more simple way for people to get their sort of health and wellness. And you know, he's absolutely done it. He has the farm, he's got honey, and he's got Promix. And to watch Promix sort of the tear that they're on, and then to see the partnership that they started with, you know, Payne Schwartz, and you know, that was led by James Brennan. I love what they're doing. I love seeing where they're going, and you know, they're just continuing to move on. Yeah,
it's just scratching the surface. That's one of those ones where I know I mentioned it, but I didn't see a lot of other people mentioning it, and it was something that I thought was just underappreciated in the market. And I think just in general that brand probably just wasn't flashy, which in a good way. Like, you know, it was, it really stood on its laurels of like, this is what we are. Here's our hard lines. You're going to be a part of this. You're going to be connected to this. And if you don't get it, or you appreciate other things, that's okay too. You know, and I think that the guys that you talked about it, like, you know, they embody that. Like, they are living it and breathing it. I think I met Devin, maybe at a gym, like there in New York City. It was involved with another supplement company at the time. And like, the first time I talked to him, he was like exuded energy and like positivity. And this, like, I was like, I'm blown away. I felt a little uncomfortable because I was, you know, totally a different person. Like, I'm a different person. Like, with those, like, I could just, okay, all right. Like, it lit me up a little bit, but I also was like, this guy, like, what kind of things are he taking? Because I'm interested in that. But it's like, you know, but when I, you know, saw that deal, I was like, this is a good deal, good partner, good. Like, this makes sense. This is one that makes sense. A lot of times you see it and you're like, I think I know why they did that, and you know, people in the know probably, you know, can decide that. But then there's the ones you just go, oh yes, like that makes sense. That is a 1 + 1 = 3 thing. Like, now they just have to keep executing on what they're doing, and they're really just early in on this. I think you mentioned like the natural, the traceable, you know, like a lot of those hard lines because of how nutrition start, which is weird because a lot of the things that nutrition does, like it wasn't really for the health of the consumer. It was like to, like, you know, over stimulation, over, you know, sweetened, over, like a lot of things that just for whatever reason were these dark holes that people didn't think like, oh, these actually are not good for people. We you know, but they are doing things that were not sexy before they became, now they're sexy. And I think they have a lot more runway left.
Look, I love the trends, you know, you know, I love the trends that are going on right now. I love that. I love that we're looking at sort of cleaner, more traceable, sort of simpler food. Yeah. And I love that the commercial results are actually starting to support it. There was a lot of that survey stuff for a long time, you know, people's sustainability, clean, like, it's always great when somebody asks you, would you do, you know, like how they phrase it, and you're like, yeah, I would, because you think so highly of yourself. But then when you have to put down the dollars, are you doing it? Now all of a sudden the support is there. So now people are actually moving big amounts of dollars or things to like really support that. Yeah, totally agree. Appreciate it, Ryan. This is a great, gosh, I mean, I know like we don't do really good with the just intro type stuff. This was like
fast and furious right into it, which
Yeah.
I love.
was awesome.
So appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.